and with earlier ones today as well. And we'll hear all about what else is coming up in the rest of the week. So what did the 19th Amendment do? Well, you know, there's a hint right over there. It gave the women the right to vote. We might take it for granted today, but the 19th Amendment was the result of decades, did you say 72 years of efforts on the part of many dedicated suffragists. And it allowed women, it allowed, the vote to allow them was passed in 1919 and then was ratified and adopted in 1920. And so we celebrated it to the extent you could celebrate anything in 2020 last year, the 100th anniversary. And it enfranchised 26 million American women in time for the 1920 election. And I'm going to read the amendment. Like a lot of these, it's really short. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Today, we have Vienna's own Lee Kitcher of Historic Vienna moderating a panel to talk about what having this voice, this vote, allows women to achieve. I just can't even imagine a world where we didn't have this voice. And our panelists will be Vienna's current mayor, Linda Colbert, and Vienna's previous mayor, Lori DiRocco, and Dumfries Council member Sydney Neville will be our panelists. And then it'll be followed by the American Association of University Women performing Failure is Impossible, a reader's theater play about the 19th Amendment. We're really looking forward to that. Now, in the audience today, we have, besides our distinguished panelists, we have Council Member Chuck Anderson. More about him later. Now, is there, I don't have my glasses on. Is there anybody else who, oh, Shamali from Walter Alcorn's office, Board of Supervisors. Any other dignitaries? Stand up and shout. Where's Steve? Steve Shannon, Judge Steve Shannon, former delegate, current newest member of the Board of Historic Vienna. Welcome. Okay, that's it. Now, I am going to turn the page. There we go. Let me introduce our panelists. I will start with Mayor Linda Colbert. Linda's parents moved to Kansas to Vienna when she was 2 years old. I can't believe you say, in 1968, so do the math. She went to Louise Archer, Thoreau, and Madison. She graduated from UVA with a BA in math and Virginia Tech with an MA in secondary education, curriculum, and instruction. She taught math at Madison High School, but decided to stay home to raise her daughters when the first was born, and she's tutored math ever since. She and her husband, her high school sweetheart, moved back to Vienna to raise their family. She got involved in their schools and activities, and then in the town. She was on the Transportation Safety Commission for 2 years, the town council for 6 years, and has been mayor for a year. She has obviously earned the importance of community involvement when she was younger. Her dad was member of town council, and her mom, of course, was Vienna's first woman mayor. Daughters are now 20 and 24. Linda and her husband live in Southeast Vienna. Then we have Lori DiRocco, former mayor, elected to town council in 2009 and served like 5 years. Was initially appointed in 2014 to fulfill the unexpired term of Mayor Seaman, and then was reelected a few times. She previously served as chair of the Planning Commission, vice chairman of Transportation Safety Commission. Lori got her degree in business and finance from Virginia Tech and an MBA from George Washington. She's a former adjunct professor at George Mason School of Management. She served as chair of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, and she's on the Rotary Club and executive committee for the Virginia Municipal League. And then there's Sydney Neville. Welcome to Vienna, Sydney. Sydney has over 2 decades of experience working across Northern Virginia to enhance the lives of youth, and a wealth of experience in the nonprofit sector. A certified master's level English teacher, philanthropist, celebrated change agent, author, motivational speaker, publisher, grant writer, and community activist. She currently serves on the Dumfries Town Council and is chair of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, the consortium of 13 localities that represent 2.9 million residents. Sydney is a native of Alexandria and graduated from Virginia State University and is a proud member of Zeta Phi Beta sorority. So there you go. She's a serial entrepreneur. I like that. And she's the owner and publisher of the Virginia Black Lifestyle magazine and is an education business consultant. All right. Just give me another moment for some thank yous. So many diverse organizations have come together to put liberty amendments, to make it real. It's been a community-driven effort. There are, as Chuck said the other day, with over 100 people on the working committee, the Zoom calls have been manageable. It's always surprised me how well they go. So these are faith community. They're listed in the back of this, actually. There are like 30 of them, organizations that focus on community service, business, education, music, and arts. And thank you to that group. Thank you to the much smaller advisory group. And thank you especially to Chuck and to Steve you are the co-facilitators of the lectures and education and you've done just a fabulous job. If you look through this brochure at the various programs that they put together, they're just amazing. And then, certainly not last nor least, well, maybe last, is Lily and Leslie from Parks and Recreation. You guys have worked so hard, so we really thank you for putting up with all this and being such cheerful proponents and hard workers. Now, I did want to, before I hand it over to Lee, I just have to say a few comments. And as has been said, no one really knows how much time she spent on Liberty Amendments Month, but it's a ton. You've been working on this since last summer. You worked with the town manager to flesh out what we're doing here today. You drafted the first version of the proclamation, and then once it became a reality, sort of a legal reality, you just threw yourself in to creating this schedule of things and exhibits, and it's not. She worked really hard putting this event together. But I wanted to tell you, you're going to see around town some other things that have Lee's mark on them. If you go to the Freeman store, we have right now an exhibit on the 19th, a poster exhibit on the 19th Amendment that's just wonderful. And all those poster exhibits are coming here, or they're here now. Oh, I walked past them. They're great, but I already looked at them at the Freeman store. So, but you guys look at them here, and then you'll see, have you seen all those sort of flippy, blowing around cards outside hanging off of little hooks? That's the flashcard quizzes, and they're outside the Freeman store, and they're outside the community center, and people are always looking at them. And there's the question on the one side and the answer on the other, and they're just clustered around reading them. So that's been fun. And then there's the Liberty Amendments Learning Tour, which is all these wonderful yard signs you'll see everywhere. And, you can learn about the events and people that, it's so much information. It's really been wonderful. And you worked with groups for these various things. She was also coordinating with people like James Madison High School, History Honor Society, George Mason University students. And so, and then the last thing that I wanted to mention that Lee's been working on is if you go on the Historic Vienna website, you have the African American driving and walking tours for Vienna, and you worked alongside Sylvia Taylor and Gloria Runyon to make those really usable and and easy and quite pretty to use. You can print them or you can just go along. And so, and Lee has just done her last five women's rights exhibits at the Freeman Store. So it culminated with the 100th anniversary of this amendment. So she's really such a perfect person to be the moderator today. And I will turn it over to you. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Anne.
Hey, Chuck.
Thank you, Anne. The title of this session is But for the 19th Amendment. But for the 19th Amendment, you all wouldn't be in your positions. So when we had this session, and voting has allowed women a voice in our government on all levels, local, state, and national. This session will explore what having that voice allows women to achieve. Today, we will explore the voice we have on the local level with Vienna's mayor, Linda Colbert, Vienna's previous mayor, Lori DeRocco, and Dumfries council member, Sidney Neville. And at the Seneca Falls Conference in 1848, all of this started. Women declared at that conference, and I quote, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted, deriving their powers from the consent of the powered. End quote. And that is from the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments that came out of that conference. These women, and there were men who signed it, believed that having the right to vote would give them a voice in how laws governing them were established. Taxation without representation was a key issue for them, but not the only one. On August 18, 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified, allowing women to vote for the first time in Virginia and throughout the United States. It took a long while for women to be elected to office in Virginia. The first two women, Helen Henderson and Sarah Lee Fane, were both elected in 1924 to Virginia's House of Delegates. It took until 1979 for the first woman, Eva May Scott, to be elected to the Virginia State Senate, having first served as a delegate for 4 two-year terms from 1971 in the House of Delegates. In 1993, Leslie Byrne was the first woman elected to represent Virginia in the U.S. House of Representatives. But so far, no women have been elected to represent Virginia in the U.S. Senate. The first woman elected mayor in Virginia was in 1930, when Carrie Wright was elected mayor of Troutdale, Virginia. Vienna's first mayor was your mother, Jane Seaman, who was elected in 2000 and served for 14 years. Now, for our questions. For all of the panelists, and I'd like to start this time with you, Mayor Colbert, Elizabeth Cady Stanton's goals for women's rights focused on family, respect, equal education, equal opportunity, equal compensation, and equal moral accountability. How far have we come, and what role can government play in achieving these?
Thank you, Lee. Is this working? Can you hear this? Okay. Thank you, Lee. And I just want to thank you before we get started for all your work. You're doing so much for Liberty Amendments Month, and we can't thank you enough. So I'm just going to say it again. And of course, Chuck and Lily and Steve and everyone, really. It's been great. So, in reading about the 19th Amendment, of course, every time I'm on a panel, I like to do a little more research. And, just thinking about 1920, 1920, what, women still couldn't vote? But then I started reading about other countries. And some countries, women couldn't vote till 1950, 1970. I was like, how could that even be? So, Certainly it's been 100 years, and I think that I'm very thankful that, of course, America kind of woke up, and the women that fought for, and the men that fought for women's right to vote did. And we've come a long way, certainly, and I'm so thankful for all that. And like I said, none of us would be, like you said, none of us would be here today because of that. But of course, we have more to do. And I think having these discussions is so important. The fact that we're just sitting here talking about this is huge. And the fact that, I think we need to continue supporting, women need to continue supporting each other, men need to continue supporting women, getting involved in government, getting involved in women issues that probably more pertain to women, but there's a lot of issues that pertain to all of us that we're all interested in. So I think just continuing to have these conversations with each other is extremely important, and that's one way that we can get there. Was that part of that was the question? Did I answer that? Yes.
There's no right or
I
wrong
know.
answer.
Well, it was such a big question. You had so many parts to it, so I thought, oh, that's a tough one to get to everything. So I'm sure in our other conversation we'll talk about some of the other things.
It's meant to tie back to what Elizabeth Cady Stanton said,
Right.
and what she wanted for all women.
Right.
And to say, have we achieved her goals? Lori, ideas?
Yeah, so I would say it has been 100 years, right, since many women had the right to vote. Not all women had the right to vote at that time. It would take another 45 years before all women had the right to vote. But I think that there has been progress, and probably not in a straight line, but I think there's a lot more that could be done. If you think about some of the kind of legislation that's been out there recently about having one woman on a board of any major corporation, having one. So how, and obviously other companies are doing, better than that, but that's something to think about. So whether they're represented in the boardroom, in the government, in the leaders of business, or even getting seed money. It's very hard for women to get seed money for new businesses more than it is for men. So those are areas where I think we continue to progress and continue to do better. The role of government in some ways is, I don't know how much you can legislate of that and how much you can't. There's obviously ways to keep things open and fair and equal. There's affirmative action. There's other ways to do that. But more of it is to continue to encourage women to go out there and to do these types of things. Throughout my time on town council and as mayor, I've talked to a lot of women who were interested in running for office, but always a bit hesitant. It's interesting, and this is a generalization. It's not for it's not for every woman and every man, but men tend to not worry about their qualifications or what their requirements are. They'll just run if they want to run. Where women will want to make sure they checked every box. Have they done everything? Have they provided all this? And once again, it's generalizations, but it's true. And I think that is something women have to continue to kind of push themselves, have confidence to do. And I really hope we continue to see more women leaders. You talked about in the state government, we've never had a woman governor. So I think we're due for a woman governor. We haven't ever had a woman lieutenant governor yet. And I think we have had a woman attorney general in the state of Virginia. So there's still space, I think, for us to continue to grow in those areas. But yes, certainly there's been some progress.
Wow, this is a tough act to follow, so I'm going to just start by giving thanks. Thank you all. Thank you, the town of Vienna, for inviting me to come and to serve on the panel today. Thank you so much. So I'm also excited to sit by such phenomenal women who represent your beautiful town. And to get to your question, there's so much to say, as far as a response. First things come to my mind are two women I look up to, two of my sorority sisters, and one is Yvonne B. Miller, and she was the first Black woman to serve at the state level in the House of Delegates and as a senator. And I also just think about the intersectionality of it all. You know, my idol, Ida B. Wells, not my soror, but Ida B. Wells, just how she got bumped to the back of the line, and the ladies of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated who fought really hard to ensure that women had the right to vote. So I'd like for everyone, just take a moment and think. I was just thinking as you were talking, Lori, of a moment in your life. You don't have to blurt it out loud. When you were most fearless, when you were your most powerful, when no one's no would stop you from doing what you wanted to achieve. And for me, that moment has to be when I was about 5 years old. I knew I could fly if I wanted to because the laws of gravity hadn't beat me up so much to know that I could not. So when we really think about our youth and the beauty of our youth and the power of our youth, and think about what could be done, and think about the words of Elizabeth, I feel like her goal, she was such a visionary, but the only thing I would add is the words yet and for all, because we need to make sure everything, every rule, every law, every policy is equitable for all, and we need more women to serve. They're not serving, you know, the numbers we like to see right now, they're just not serving yet. So there's time, there's room for growth. I feel like the government and through our policies, which is why I ran for office, is because I wanted to bring forth change through policy. We need to enforce the policy that we put in place, such as, you know, the 13th, 14th, 15th, 19th Amendment, we're still fighting. So although we have made significant strides since 1920, we still have a lot of work to do.
Thank you. Linda, so how does having the right to vote make women's lives better?
Well, it gives us a say. And, you know, I think women are great about gathering. You know, we're great about gathering and talking to each other. And so, you know, I watch as women, you know, and men are involved in PTAs and stuff too. I'm not excluding them. But I watch as some of the women get together and they think, you know, our school needs this, or our, you know, Girl Scouts need this. And they come together and they really are very powerful, I think. And they get things done. And they, you know, and they come out, they come to me, they came to Lori, they come to the council and local government. If it's not local, we go to the state. And so, you know, having that right to vote, I think really gives just that empowerment to us. And then, you know, allows us to start organizing and to start, you know, really getting things done for our communities.
It's interesting that you talk about community and women coming together in a community. The women's rights movement had its origins in the time when, after the Revolutionary War, when, because we separated church and state, churches were losing their members. So the churches said, how do we get the families back in? And the way they did it is they started these programs to reach out to the community and help people in trouble, help the poor, help those who are ill. And who were the people who helped? It was women. But at that time, women weren't allowed to stand up and talk in church. So this sense of community is something that is totally ingrained in us. Wanting to help each other is also part of our nature.
Yeah,
so
100%, right. And whether it's, you know, in all ages, whether it's our children, whether it's, you know, women of our own age, elderly, whoever it is, and, you know, men. I mean, whoever it is, whatever's happening in the community, whether it's transportation or getting to school safely, you know, I think I agree with you. I think that gathering together and just, you know, even getting together over coffee or something, and then your conversation ends up over, oh, we need to get this done, and then, well, how are we going to do it? Well, do you know Lori? We'll go talk to her, or Linda, or whoever, or Sydney, or whoever it happens to be, or somebody on one of our commissions, and so things just kind of get done that way.
So, Sydney, why should we bother to vote? How can women make a difference?
Why should we bother to vote? I think Kamala Harris said it herself. You better vote like your life depends on it, because it actually does. Mm-hmm. It actually does. When we vote, we're just not voting for, who's more popular, who has the most money, who is most aligned, and who will represent the issues that matter to you. We vote on referendums, not just the representatives in the office, but there are referendums that people often forget. The common voter will come up to the poll and it's like, what does that mean? And it's like, these are things that impact your daily lives. So you better vote like your life depends on it, and vote for those who have fought relentlessly. Some paid the ultimate cost for us to be able to vote, although we still have significant strides to make with voting rights. I think the state has made significant progress with voter rights this year, but there's still work to do. But you always have to vote like your life depends on it. And, woman, if you want someone to lead with passion, you better vote for a woman.
I couldn't have said it better. So, Lori, how did you choose the initiatives that you chose to push in Vienna?
So I would say there were a few things that I, as a mayor, wanted to do within the community, but our initiatives really came from the community. Most of the time, those initiatives are things that we can look out in our community and see, things like transportation, things like perhaps how we get safely to school on sidewalks, public, infrastructure, and making sure our infrastructure is in place, and our roads. So those types of things were always prominent. But I think for me, I did weekly walks because I wanted to be able to meet people and see people on a regular basis. I wanted to engage our schools, so I met with the principals every month and made sure I was in their schools, meeting with their students and letting students know that we have a local government, because the rate of how many people vote in the local election versus our state and our federal is lower. And so I would always ask the students, so tell me how many of your parents vote in the town of Vienna elections? And sometimes they'd be like, The best story actually is one of them said, so do you drive around in a limo? And I was like, no. I was like, no. But anyway, so I think, so that was something that was important to me, is to connect with the schools. And then the other thing that I really wanted to connect with is our nonprofits. Our nonprofits do a ton of work here in our community, and it sometimes goes under the radar because I don't think people really realize. And when I mean nonprofits, that's everything from our local civic organizations, our women organizations, our school organizations, our religious organizations. They really do a ton of work. And so those were things that were important to me. And I think those things have kind of been important in our town for many years. I probably just did a twist on my own of it. So I think generally when you say initiatives, they come from the public and rise up, and then we try to find solutions or see where government can help in those areas.
Linda, would you want to add something to that from your perspective?
Right. No, I think what Lori's saying 100% I agree with the initiatives, coming to us. I think one thing, when I started in office, I wanted to improve communication, and that was just something that I think we can always improve on communication, always, right? And so now we have, every day we have better technology. We need to be using that. And I like to get out to residents and not always expect them to come to us, because we can kind of get in that, we didn't hear anything. We never knew. Well, okay, but you got to get out there and really find out what's going on and what the issues are and where people, in their daily lives, usually it's things in their daily lives. Their trash cans aren't getting picked up. And I don't mean that is a small thing. That can irritate you, I mean, these are things that people deal with. And obviously, we have a very smart population in Vienna and in this area. And so Some people are really concerned with the zoning, and some people are like, yeah, whatever, tell me if I need to worry about it. I trust you, but I care about, the sidewalk in front of my house or something. And so I just think part of it is just that communication, getting out to finding out what people are really thinking.
Sydney, how do you choose? How does being a woman affect your ability to get community support for your initiatives?
Good question. I think it has to do with the innate ability or innate power as women to nurture. We can easily have our pulse to the community. We're good listeners. People do come to us and want to tell us what's on their mind. So I think that power of nurturing helps to look at the greater scope of, what do I want to do? What are my goals that I made up on my own? But then it's also talking to the people and having those conversations that were mentioned, or conversations like we are having right now, just to see what works for the greater good of community. And it also goes back to purpose and passion, because I think with that nature that women have, that we possess, everyone knows we're not going to do something that we don't feel passionate about. And everyone knows once you get a woman fired up and ready to fight for something, there's nothing that's going to stop her for fighting for the people, especially for the children, for the senior citizens, for the voices of the voiceless who need someone to fight for them. So I'd have to say it would be that nurturing power that we all possess. And no disrespect to the men, but just it's an innate power as a woman. And I think that has helped me greatly.
Thank you.
Lee,
I like that.
Can I share something? So you were talking about how does that help being a woman? I will also share, this happened just a few years ago to me. There was a businessman. We were talking about business on Church Street, Mill, and Dominion. And we were trying to figure out an issue. And the businessman said to me, you're doing a good job. He's like, I said, thank you. And he said, a lot of my friends and fellow businessmen were saying, she's a woman. She's a woman, how is she going to, and I was kind of taken back when he said it to me, just because I was and he said, but I told them how, you're working really hard and you really care about businesses. So I still think sometimes, not all, but there is still a perception, maybe for certain issues, that women aren't able to lead in those situations. Now this businessman was saying this because he and I had worked together a lot and had a relationship and worked with me, but perhaps those others didn't. And, but I just say that because the perception was, well, she's a woman, she really can't lead in this situation. So I just thought that's something, and that was only a few years ago. So I think that's just something to be aware of, I think, for all of us.
So that's a nice lead into my next question, which is currently just over 25% of Virginia's Senate and 30% in Virginia's House are women, far less than the percentage in the population. How does this difference in representation impact the ability to develop and pass legislation? And how different is governing the state from governing locally? Laura, you want to take that?
So one thing I would say, we talked about voting, and I would say that it's really important to always vote, obviously, and women should vote because when they're voting, they're also helping set the agenda a bit. That's part of their voting and putting their voice out there. But I would also say voting in your local elections matters a lot. It's what affects you the most usually, the local and state elections. We live in a Dillon Rule state, so our local government is granted powers by the state, and so it's very important to be involved in local and state activities. So I would say it's important to get them to run. And it's, I guess my real kind of issue is more women need to run, obviously, and to encourage more women. I will say I was mayor because a woman, Mayor Seaman, encouraged me to run for mayor. I don't know if I would have done that if it wasn't encouraged by her. So I think having more women encourage other women to run, I think is really important. And there might be men who also hopefully will encourage women to run for different offices. But I do think that's really important. The local elections, I'll share, in 2009 was my first election, and Howard Springsteen won. He was the third highest vote getter by 2 votes. So getting out and voting is really, really important. So it encourages everyone to vote. That's the minimum all of us can do. And then the next step, I think, is encouraging women and supporting women to run. Because it can be something, I've had many women say, how do you manage your life? How do you do this? How do you do that? And also run for office. So there's, I think, encouragement and support is a big thing to help women kind of take to that next level and hopefully get more women in elected office.
And how about getting legislation passed? Are women good at getting legislation passed? Sydney?
I think so.
I agree. I think they're definitely,
Yes.
they're excellent at passing legislation. Again, because they're listeners and they work with the village or the community. I like to say the village. My last name, Neville, is French for the village. So, I go back to, and I think earlier in my earlier statements, I mentioned 2 stories. Another one was Maggie Lena Walker. Visit her house in Richmond, learn about her. So she ran, I want to say it was in 1904, correct me if I'm probably wrong on that number, but during Reconstruction there was a black ticket. And she ran at that time for what is now the Secretary of Education. So the title was a little different, but it was an elected office then with a slate of men. And of course they all lost, but woman, we have to be fearless. And we have to run. That's the only way we're going to make the change. Those numbers that you shared are cause for pause. To have those numbers, there's a lot of room for growth in that area. I think everyone should inspire someone else to run. And I think that inspiration comes from things like the civil rights movement. When I think about the leaders, I've done a fellowship in Alabama, which was ground zero for the civil rights movement. And when you look at those pictures, and when you read and you watch the videos, you see there are always children involved. The children have always had a seat at the table, always. So mentoring is very important when we talk about, just preparing for the future, with everything. I consider teaching just shaping the minds of the leaders to a future I may or may not see, but it's power in inspiring other people to do the things that sometimes we are afraid to do. So I would challenge every woman, if you're thinking about doing something, if you're thinking about running for office, changing those statistics, do not wait for the status quo to tell you, okay, Mary, it's your turn now. You decide when it's your turn. You get up, talk to other people about it. They'll support you, and you run. But yes, women as leaders, rather at the table, serving a meal, whatever their role is, we tend to listen, we reach back. You have your representative, but that doesn't mean if you are not elected, you have no power. So no legislation gets passed without the power and support of the people doing the work at the ground level, to push it through. So, and I think it goes back to that innate ability, that power of nurturing and that connection, that pulse to the community is what makes us great, just excellent at pushing that policy through. And I think it was something else in your question about the state level and the local level. So I think it's all about making an impact. So, and as was stated before, all elections matter. I don't care if it's one item on the ballot, get out there and you vote. So I feel as a councilwoman, I make a huge impact on the lives of the roughly 5,300 people I represent. But thanks to Dylan's rule and things of that nature, at the state level, the only difference I see, you're still making an impact, but you can impact a greater constituency at the state level. But no matter which level it is, there is a huge impact to be made. So everyone has a role to play and should get involved. Thank you.
Linda?
Well, I just wanted to add, talking about the state level, both of you did, and in our jurisdiction, we are very close with Mark Keene and Chap Peterson, and they come to council, and the council has good conversations with them, and we let them know what Vienna issues are and what does Vienna want. And so when you elect your local leaders, they also have connections with the state leaders. And so, we're not voting at that level, but we certainly let them know what our constituents are feeling and what things they want to see ranked highly, when they go in and they represent us. And so that's important. And then, women running, it's sometimes the election is the part that I think not just women, men too, can be a little intimidating, because elections can not always be friendly. Unfortunately, I think that's not a shocking statement. And I think with social media can be cruel, can be very cruel. Now, personally, I grew up in a household with a father and mother that were involved in local politics. And so for me, it just is a little different. I have a little tougher skin. I understand that sometimes people say things and it's out of, I just always try to remember people say things out of a passion where they're at. And rarely is it personal. It may sound personal, but it's usually, frustration. So I understand that. But for a lot of women and men maybe too, that election process can be really hard. And so I always encourage them to start at the boards and commission level and get involved there, and then, kind of get their feet wet. And then I think it takes a lot of support, and then get your support. Like you were talking about that too. That's a huge thing, because I think you feel empowered too if you have people that are supporting you and are saying, you can do it, we believe in you. Then you kind of feel like, all right, I can do this, and then off you go and you do it. And there's going to be, bumps along the way, but with anything in life there is. So, that's just my thoughts on that. I think that just continuing to get your support and, get involved.
Mm. So, Linda, what is the role of preconceived notions and attitudes in the job?
So, are we talking because I'm a female? Yeah, I kind of figured that was the question, right? I think some people probably maybe don't know I'm pretty tough. I think some people can think that women are gonna, I don't know, what are we gonna do? Cry, crumble? And I don't usually do that. I don't think I ever do that, actually. Chuck is, he asked him. But no, really, I think I think there is a little of that, unfortunately. And, I think there occasionally, Lori told a story, and, there have been a few, very few. I really don't experience it often, but there have been some times where I went, wait, what did that person just say, or what did they think? And you kind of think, oh, I'm going to try to think that's not what they're thinking or saying, but sometimes it is. So, but you know what? Even with those preconceived, I think you just got to do your thing. I mean, you can't really let it stop you, bother you, anything. You just have to keep marching forward and being who you are. And I think, again, if you're doing it for the right reasons, then that's going to show through, and your passion is going to show through, and you're going to listen to people, which is number one. Listen, and you'll get the job done. I mean, I think with a lot of things, people can have preconceived ideas, male, female, different backgrounds, whatever it is. I mean, there could be a lot of different things, and I think we all just have to go, well, you can think that, but guess what? That's not who I am. So, and move forward. So that's just kind of how I have dealt with it.
Lee, can I add? I would say in local government, too, that you can get to know your elected officials a bit more. So some of those preconceived notions, whatever you may have as any individual on someone, can change based on those interactions and based on the conversations. And so I think communication, like you said, is really important. And I think the ability, at least at the local level, to change sometimes preconceived notions exists, which I think is really helpful. So.
That's perfect, Lori. I'm sorry, I just have to say one more thing.
Go
No,
ahead.
Lori, you just reminded me of a story. I won't get into it, but it was definitely someone had a preconceived idea of me. I don't think it was because I was female. I don't know what it was, but on a particular topic, I was listening and not saying things, and they thought it was because I maybe didn't care or something. And we went to coffee, and she said, "Wow, you're really somebody I didn't know. You're very different than I thought." That's a very shortened version of what happened. But what I'm saying is, you're right. We live in a community where we can, I love when people come in and I'll meet them for coffee. They can come to my office or I'll go to their house. And we all do that. We love doing that. We're all neighbors. We want to know as many people as possible. And so I think that does make it very personal. I'm sure you feel the same way too, that we're just moms and dads and sisters and whatever, and we're just doing the normal stuff that everybody else is, and so it's just kind of making those relationships.
Lori, how are women's issues different from community issues?
That is a good question. I don't think they're that different. I think women's issues are community issues, and that's why I think it's important to have representation by women in areas of government, in the community, because things like education, things like healthcare, sustainability, transportation, childcare, all of those things are things that affect women, families, individuals, seniors, and I think those things are the community issues. I really do think they're very aligned. And like I said, I think that's more of a reason why we should have, women represented in all areas of our government, from the local to the state to the federal, to ensure that we have our voices in those issues, because they affect all of us. So I think they're the same. One other thing I wanted to say is talking about a little preconceived. I also had someone in 2014, when I was first elected mayor, say, "I think there's too many women on council." Because it was one of the first few times that we had 4 women and 3 men. And once again, I'm always kind of taken back, because I just don't, and I guess people feel comfortable enough sharing these things. So I just listen and say, okay. But I thought about that and thought, wow, did people think that before? There have been, in the middle 2000s, there was a time when there was 4 women on council and 3 men, but and that's fairly even. I would love to have that even in the opposite direction for women in many of these state things. But I thought that was interesting, and so I think, but that was at the beginning, and over time, I think perhaps they felt comfortable then having 4 women and 3 men, and that the women are the majority. So I think there are sometimes these preconceived notions, and how do you kind of break those down and change them? So I just wanted to add that story as well.
Sydney, your thoughts?
Well, as I'm listening to the responses, it's coming to my attention. I'm just going back and thinking, in 2018, when I was elected to the Dumfries Town Council, there were 2 other women. 3 women were elected, and I think we were numbers 3, 4, and 5 to have ever served on the Dumfries Town Council. Wow. Ever. So just thinking back, I've lived in the town since 2002, and just to see the greater change in the community has been tremendous. We've had a lot more community programming, a lot more outreach, a lot more educational programs. So, just to co-sign what Lori's saying, what Linda has said, in the past, I want to say the first woman was elected to the Dumfries Town Council within probably the past 8 years. Wow. Then another woman came along, and then there was the 3 of us. So we've had 5. And right now, there are 3 women, 4 men. So I can definitely say, looking back to when I purchased my home in town, there's been a huge difference in the past 8 years with women representation on our council. So I also want to just take a moment and just give some applause to the men. I hope you all aren't feeling anyway, especially, feminists are men and women. So shout out to the men that are representing, 70% at the state level right now. So, but you wouldn't be there without the strong support of women. helping you make legislative decisions.
Linda, any thoughts on the question?
I think.
The question was how are women's issues different from community issues?
Right. Right. No, I agree with Lori, and I think that the more you get women involved, the more you get all people, all different backgrounds. Like I said, male, female, the better your community is going to be. The more well-rounded it's going to be. It's going to be answering to people of all needs and things that people see. I mean, I don't ride my bike very often. I pretty much stick to the WNOD trail, but I'm not out on the street. So how do I know what's safe, for example? So there's people that ride their bikes all the time. Well, we need those people to answer. We need people. Now I don't have little children anymore. Mine are grown. So we need people that, can talk about those issues. So I think whatever it is, we need people of all representation. And I think on the council and just people being involved in the community, and then makes a better community.
So this is for all of you. What advice would you give to the next generation of female leaders?
I'll start. I was going to say, don't be afraid to sell yourself. Because when you talk about women, I think, which is great to be able to talk the issues. I think women are good about talking about the issues, good about collaborating, good about communicating. But when you have to go door to door, and in our case in the town of Vienna, that's historically been how people run in their elections, which I think is actually wonderful. Mayor Seaman was the first person to ever knock on my door when I came into town in 1996. And I remember that so distinctly and thought, what a great community that the mayor is knocking on my door and is asking me like what I think about the town. So I just thought that was fabulous. So I would say to women is to, even if you're fearful, even if you're scared, do it anyway. Take the leap and also feel comfortable selling yourself. I think that's the biggest thing. That would be my advice for women leaders in the future.
No. I along the same lines, be confident. This is kind of what you're saying too. And there have been so many times where I have been nervous about things, of course, and I'm sure all three of us have been nervous about things. But the more you do, the better you get at it, the more comfortable you get at it, and being prepared. If you're prepared, now that doesn't mean that you're going to be you're always going to be prepared and you're not going to, mess up a little, or you're not going to know something. But you know what? Admit it. Who cares? That's okay. You can learn from other people all the time, And so I think that if women want to get involved, maybe get involved at, any level in the community. We have so many places to get involved, and you just start learning because you start, you're around other people that are involved, and then you just start learning more and more about your community, and you and it's not for everybody. I mean, council's not for everybody, but maybe the Rotary Club is, or maybe being on the Planning Commission is, or something like that. So, yeah, and talk to people who are involved, and get some advice from them.
So what you're saying is everybody has an opportunity to contribute in a way that they enjoy contributing.
100%.
And we need them to contribute. We need them to contribute in the way they feel comfortable and they want to give. I think that's what really creates this really big sense of community, and really has all voices heard and seen, and we kind of progress and move forward as a community and a country. Yeah.
Sydney?
So I echo those sentiments once again. So work in your ministry, I always go back to Romans 8:28, work in your purpose, work in your ministry. There are several ways to serve and make an impact on your community. I would also share to make sure you have a good mentor, or 2 or 3, and make sure you take time to mentor someone else coming up behind you. Never underestimate the power of your voice. As was said, don't crumble. Don't let anyone make you crumble. But never underestimate the power of your voice. That voice that may make you tremble is the very voice that needs to be heard. And there are many different stages on which you can speak, sing your song, and make an impact in your ministry and what comes natural to you. And one more thing, don't be afraid to swim against the wave. Be strong. That's the only way, to swim against the current. That's the only way to make waves. So be strong, get out there, make those waves, and when you're ready, reach back to the people you've worked with, and you'll make an impact together. Don't let anything stop you from doing what is in your purpose to do.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. Do we have any questions? Yes.
I'd like to ask about women as organizers for voting specifically, but it seems like there is a very heavy role for women behind the scenes, more so than in front, but that they can be very effective.
The question was the role of women as organizers.
So I would say, again, we have so many, and I hope I'm answering your question. Tell me if I'm not. But all the different organizations we have, there are no doubt so many women behind the scenes, like you're saying. And some people like to kind of they'd rather be maybe behind the scenes. I mean, I think about just this Liberty Amendments Committee and what it took to put this on, and the women and men that did that. So, I think is that the question? How can women get?
The linking to the paucity of women in office.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at who is organizing political campaigns, women are very often in the majority and do most of the work. There's a disconnect there. What do we need to do about that?
My campaign, I would say, for mayor, had probably an equal amount of men and women, so I can't speak to that. But I think we've all kind of touched on maybe why women don't want to run sometimes for office. But we've talked about, maybe some ways that to give them the confidence and to give them. But I don't think anyone should be forced to do it either. I think there's roles that women can play. I wouldn't really even call it behind the scenes. I mean, you have a direct voice to any elected official, if you're in their precinct. I don't know. Do you have anything to add?
No, so you're saying, as women as organizers of the voting, of campaigns, why is that not translating into more women in office? And I would say because I think women are hesitant about taking that next step sometimes. I think sometimes they don't want to put themselves out there in that realm because it's a very public realm, especially at the state and federal levels. And I think sometimes people feel uncomfortable in that area, or they feel like they're not qualified. So many women do I feel like, and I said this earlier in the conversation, they said, well, I haven't done this or I haven't done that. I'm telling you, most men don't ever think that way. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's true. I think more women need to be able to have confidence in their abilities, know that they can do the work, and put themselves out there. And I think it does take encouragement from other women. I think what Sydney said, I think mentoring other women. I am sitting here because someone took the time to do that. I'm hoping other people are there in positions because women are encouraging them. And I think it takes other women to encourage them, saying, you can do this, you can take that next step. And you may fail. That's the other thing. Women don't like to fail. I think that's probably true for everyone, but you have to sometimes continue to try because you might not win that first election. You may have to, keep trying before it gets to that next level. So I think women just having the confidence to kind of take on that next step and encouraging. And I would ask Sydney, you're a younger generation than myself. I think the younger generation is definitely more kind of looking towards that and wanting to run. And I hope that's the case. I hope we see a lot more women wanting to run and put themselves out there. So
I think that's definitely the case, and I appreciate your question, and I can be totally honest with you and wish I had a magic wand that would have this answer saying, there it is right there. That's why we work so hard behind the scenes, but we need to jump over this hurdle to make sure we are the representatives as well. But no elected official stands on their own. If it weren't for the army of people who work together and galvanize to get us elected, we wouldn't be here right now, but I think there's a lot of reflection that has taken place. We had a lot of wonderful candidates run for governor this year, in particular two amazing women. And I think for my generation, not having data, I'd love to see some data on this, but not having data on it, I think some of us are now seeing what happened. I think we reflect and we look at it differently. I think when we reflect on moments such as that, the energy isn't, yeah, see, that's why I'm not going to run. I'm just going to sit over here and do this or that, or I'm just going to go vote. The energy is, okay, so we need to get prepared. So we all know the Board of Elections has their calendar out. We see which elections are coming up. And I think the energy definitely amongst my peers is, who's going to do what? Who's going to do what? And even we try and fail, which happened to me, you live to fight another day. You don't crumble, But I think the power of those who work to make us real is absolutely phenomenal. And I believe what happened in Virginia, especially with the two amazing women, the Jennifers, running for governor, I think that's going to energize more women to run. I believe looking in the next 5 years, we're going to see a significant change to the numbers that I would quote them, but 20-30%. We're going to see a significant change in those numbers. So I don't have an answer. I think we can all say we don't have a specific answer, but I do think that life teaches us lessons, and I think what happened this election cycle is going to motivate more women to run. And it's not going to be just my generation. I think it's going to be, that generation Y and these millennials. They're fire. They don't care what's going on. If they want to do something, they're going to go get it. So I think we're in the middle of a shift. And I think we're going to see some change in the next few years to come. So I hope that helps.
I just want to add one more thing. We talk a lot about support for each other, certainly. When I ran, my mom said, if I can do it, you can do it. Well, that was hugely powerful for my mother to say that to me. And she also said, if there's someone will say to you, your mother wouldn't have done that, or your father wouldn't have done that, or voted that way. And she said, you just do what you want to do, and so that was huge confidence. Lori, when I was on council, she was mayor, gave me huge confidence. She helped me so much. But also I think it comes from your family, and that's not something we've really mentioned. And so I think, having a husband that supports you and your kids. I certainly had a family conversation before I even ran for council and said, what do you think, you guys? This is going to take me away from you some, but do you support me doing that? And so I think you've got to have that family support also. But that's just something you have to figure out with your family, I think.
Any other? Yes.
You have mentioned support.
There's a microphone.
Sorry. You have referenced so well the support from one another and from your families and having mentors. There have been a number of organizations that have been formed over the years to identify and assist both women and minorities, to groom them for public office. And I just wondered, it's not necessarily what you experienced personally, but in your general knowledge, for example, did the two Jennifers, were they assisted by these types of organizations? Are these organizations, in fact, making a difference in their endeavors
to identify and promote minority candidates?
I was going to say I don't know enough. I don't know enough about those organizations to know what their success rate is in promoting certain candidates, in minority candidates, women candidates. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that having an individual people who have done the job be a mentor to you is extremely helpful. So I don't know if those types of people are part of those organizations. I think if they are, that's extremely helpful. And I also would say Sydney is the chair of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. That is all the elected officials from our Northern Virginia area. And I would say having support there has been very helpful. Virginia Municipal League is all the towns and cities in the state of Virginia. Having support there and other people to talk to, I think that would be a springboard too for state election for anyone in the state or local government. So I think having those elected officials and other elected officials who've seen this before to help you and guide doesn't mean everyone, issues change over time, things change over time, but having them to kind of have been in your shoes and know how it feels and know some of the fears, some of the pros, the cons, the excitement, the challenges is very helpful to helping women move into actually running for election.
Yes, I'm just thinking back to I've participated in and I've connected to a lot of different organizations. I can't really speak to everything both of the Jennifers, so I can't really compare, with everything they have done, as I'm not 100% sure. But I do know there are some organizations that definitely help prepare you for leadership in a variety of roles, in a plethora of roles. Does that leadership lead to political leadership? Sometimes it does. So I can tell you when I pledged my sorority, and not to say how old I am, but yeah, 1998.
You got to own your age.
Yeah,
Own
1998 on the lofty hill, Virginia State University. I learned lessons that carried me a lifetime. One of the most powerful lessons I've learned was to develop a personal relationship with Robert and his rules of order. No matter what you're going to do in your career, hopefully you will be at a table where you need to know that language of Robert and his rules to be heard and to be able to speak at a table. And that is something, going back to 1998, I wasn't thinking about that at all. It's like, oh my gosh, why is she making me go back to the bylaws, Article 2, Section 3-4? Like, what are we doing? But it has guided me through several a meeting ever since. And I'm going back 23 years right now. So things like that are significant. And I know one of the Jennifers does belong to sorority. I'm sure that helped her in that way as well. Then there's the Minority Political Leadership Institute through VCU. I participated in that program and completed that in 2012. That definitely helped me to learn more about policy, legislation that had been passed. I made some wonderful connections with other community leaders throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, and it allowed me to explore issues in certain regions of the state, which was definitely helpful. Shameless plug, the Grace E. Harris Leadership Institute has openings for that program and a few others right now. So I encourage anyone to apply and let me know if you have any questions. But then there are your leadership programs like Leadership Prince William, Leadership Arlington, there are Leadership Fairfax, Leadership, I think Fredericksburg even has one. They're all over the state. So I think those help with the power of just the archetype we've had today, communication and conversations. Conversations are very powerful. So participation in organizations such as those help you to understand, communicate, build bonds and form alignments that may help you in the future in a way you may not even think about it when you are actually participating in the program. So I can go on and on. I'm connected to a lot of organizations, but there's a space for everyone to get involved and take trainings, participate in professional development as women do. That's what we do, right? A man comes to the job, oh, I got my bachelor degree. Let me apply for that senior level staff position. Woman, oh, let me go get my doctorates first, and then I will, So just get involved. You never know how it's going to help you in the future, whether it's your local women's group, your NAACP, your urban league. It's Alexandria's birthday today, and I have to talk about the importance of the Urban League. They had a thriving Urban League in Alexandria, and I met some amazing people, and I used to always come up from Prince William County to their events, like John Chapman, who also is a commissioner with NVRC on the Alexandria City Council. Simone Sanders, I can't believe I don't have any pictures with her, but we were at several Urban League events several years ago, and there's a thriving urban league in the Hampton Roads area. So just, there's always something to do. Get involved. You don't necessarily have to be the one running the organization. Just be there and align with the mission and help push it through. And I hope that helped answer the question.
We have one more question in the back.
Something, because I am good friends with Jennifer Carroll-Foy, and I know she and Danica Rome and Hala Ayala are all graduates of the Emerge program, as is Irene Shin, who was recently elected. So programs like that Emerge is for Democratic women. There are programs that are also nonpartisan, like the Sorensen Institute, but Emerge is specifically for women candidates. And I've been through their program as well. The training there does provide a support system. So when we talk about how women can support each other, it offers you a lot of resources, training, and guidance and that support. And they came and spoke to the rest of our class to tell us how Emerge had helped them through their career. So programs like that are super important to take part in, support, and help amplify women's voices.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of you for coming today. It's been very interesting, enlightening, and refreshing. I got the sense that community is at the heart of what women bring to government. A sense of nurturing, as you said, Sydney, to nurture our community to make it better. And when we achieve an objective, we set another one. We don't sit back and say, oh, I did that. There's nothing left to do. We say, okay, what's next? So thank you, all three of you, for serving. Appreciate it. The contributions women make to our community is really important. So thank you, everyone, for attending. We will now be changing the set for the next performance, which is Failure is Impossible. And while they are changing the set, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's coming up. So I'm moving over here. Nate, is this working? Good. Okay, for those of you who are at home or in the audience, please make sure that you have a copy of our brochure. And if you don't have the brochure, just Google Liberty Amendments Month Vienna, and you will get it. What we have coming up, this is every week, is here. We are now on the 19th Amendment. After this performance this afternoon, we have Women Rock on the Town Green, and that will start at 6:30. And then if you want to spend some time before that, you can go to the District 3 Flower Show at the Freeman Store. It's a wonderful show with suffrage as the theme of the exhibits. And they took some suffrage cartoons and interpreted them in flower designs. Then tomorrow, we have the suffrage rally. And the suffrage rally is really important because it's got two groups of young people performing. Girl Scouts have written their own performance, and young people from the Baha'i group are going to read 10 biographies of people who helped make all of these amendments. And these are 10 and 12-year-olds. It'll be really nice to come see. Alice Paul, which is over there, will be there for photo opportunities, as well as the sashes that you see women wearing, so you can have a lovely photo op. Then on Tuesday, we have Kids on the Green. On Wednesday, we have Stories and Songs by the Freeman Store. And on Wednesday evening, we have Gender Equality Panel. It is a virtual panel, so please go to the website or use the QR code to find the connection. And then Thursday, we have preschool story time and a talk in the evening by Winifred Conkling, who's written a book about the women's rights movement, and that will be at Church of Holy Comforter at 7 o'clock. Friday, we have Stories and Songs with our very own council member, Nisha Patel, on a book that she wrote. And we have Women Rock 2, a second women's concert, Friday night. And then, drum roll, it is the Liberty Amendments final multicultural festival on the 17th from 2 to 7 with crafts and food and lots of performances. So we hope to see you. Please be sure to get your copy of the brochure with all the activities. And before you go today, you can take your picture with Alice Paul. Thank you.
Let me just let him know that you're not going to use the mic. Thank you, Louise. All right, we're ready to get started with the play now. So we're asking everyone to please take your seats and give a warm welcome to the AAUW Vienna branch. Please put your hands together.
Thank you for being here today. If you did not receive a playbill, is this on? If you did not receive a playbill, please raise your hand so that we can give you one. It has important information about the various characters in the script. I just want to welcome you to the Reader's Theater production of Failure is Impossible. The mission of AUW is to advance gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. And we have been working for women since 1881. This play we're going to present was commissioned to be part of the 75th anniversary of the passing of the 19th Amendment. Rosemary Knoller used primary sources, and it was first performed at that celebration at the National Archives. We encourage you to take the playbill home and learn more about some of the less familiar figures in history. If you've not already done so, please turn off your phones or any other devices, and we will get ready for the show. This summer will be the 101st anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. Do I hear someone say, wait a minute, the country is 245 years old, but women have only been voting 101 years? What's the problem here? The problem began with the words of the Founding Fathers. Not the ones they put in, but the ones they left out. In 1776, when John Adams was sitting with a committee of men in Philadelphia writing the Declaration of Independence, he got a letter from his wife, Abigail.
Dear, dear, dear John, in the new code of laws, remember the ladies. Do not put such unlimited power in the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. We will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation.
But when the Founding Fathers sat down to write the Declaration and the Constitution, they left out one critical word: women. Nearly 60 years later, when Sarah and Angelina Grimke spoke to state legislatures about the evils of slavery, their actions were denounced from the pulpit as contrary to God's law and the natural order.
The power of women is her dependence, flowing from that weakness God has given her for her protection. When she assumes the place and tone of a man as a public reformer, her character becomes unnatural, and the way opened for degeneracy and ruin.
Sarah Grimke had an answer for that.
This distinction between men and women as moral beings, what is virtue in a man is vice in a woman? All I ask of our brethren is they take their feet off our neck and permit us to stand upright.
In 1848, a group of women organized the first women's rights convention in Seneca Falls, New York. It took great courage in the 1840s because respectable women did not even speak in public, let alone call meetings. Elizabeth Cady Stanton said later,
We felt as helpless and hopeless as though we'd been asked to construct a steam engine.
but they were determined. They rewrote the Declaration of Independence.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal.
And they called for equal rights under the law. At the convention, abolitionist Frederick Douglass spoke in favor of women voting. Reporting the resolutions of the convention in his newspaper, the North Star, he noted,
In respect to political rights, there can be no reason in the world for denying a woman the elective franchise.
In the 1850s, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucy Stone led a group of courageous women who plunged headlong into the fight for abolition and universal suffrage. They formed the American Equal Rights Association, but one newspaper denounced them as
Mummified and fossilized females, void of domestic duties, habits, and natural affections.
but in fact, most of the women were married with children. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote suffrage speeches while nursing her 6th child, a daughter who would continue her mother's work. When the Civil War began in 1861, suffragists deferred their campaign for the vote to give full attention to the national crisis. Annie T. Whittenmeyer was appointed superintendent of all Army diet kitchens. Louisa May Alcott and thousands of other women served as nurses. In 1865, when the war was over and Congress debated an amendment to give freed slaves the right to vote, the suffragists petitioned Congress to include women too.
We represent 15 million people, 1/2 the population of the country. The Constitution classes us as free people, yet we are governed without our consent, compelled to pay taxes without appeal, and punished for violations of law without choice of judge or juror. You are now amending the Constitution and placing new safeguards around the individual rights of 4 million emancipated slaves. We ask that you extend the right of suffrage to women, the only remaining class of disenfranchised citizens, and thus fulfill your constitutional obligations.
Sojourner Truth, whose speech, Ain't I a Woman, had so moved the Equal Rights Convention in 1851, spoke again in 1867 for women's right to vote.
I speak for the rights of colored women. I want to keep the thing stirring. Now that the ice is cracked, you have been taking our rights for so long that you think, like a slaveholder, that you own us.
Suffragist Frances Gage wrote, 52,000 pulpits in this country have been teaching women the lesson that has been taught them for centuries, that they must not even think about voting. But when 52,000 pulpits at the beginning of the war lifted up their voices and asked of women, come out and help us, did we stand back? In every home across this nation, we rose up and went to work for our country.
But In spite of the petitions and the passion, the 14th and 15th Amendments were silent on the issue of voting rights for women. Nevertheless, the suffragists would not give up. In 1869, Lucy Stone sent out an appeal to the men and women of America.
Get every man or woman to sign this petition. Who is not satisfied while women, idiots, felons, and lunatics are the only classes excluded from the exercise of the right of suffrage. Let the great army of working women who wish to ensure a fair day's wage for a fair day's work sign it. Let the wife from whom the law takes the right to what she earns sign it. Let the mother who has no legal right to her own children sign it.
Civil War nurse Clara Barton spoke at the suffrage convention in 1870.
Brothers, when you were weak and I was strong, I toiled for you. Now you are strong. And I ask your aid. I ask the ballot for myself and my sex. As I stood by you, pray now you stand by me and mine.
When the Senate considered the woman question again in 1872, the same tired old arguments were raised to oppose women voting.
I hope, sir, that it will not be considered ungracious of me that I will oppose the will of any lady. But when she so far misunderstands her duty as to go to working on the roads and serving in the army, I want to protect her against it. Should we attempt to overturn the social status of the world as it has existed for 6,000 years?
The congressman from Texas wasn't the only lawmaker who argued that if the founding fathers had meant women to vote, they should have said so directly. Elizabeth Cady Stanton responded,
Well, women did vote in America at the time the Constitution was adopted. If the framers of the Constitution meant we should not, well, why did they not distinctly say so? The women of this country, having at last roused up to our rights and duties as citizens, have a word to say here. It is not safe to leave the intentions of the Founding Fathers or of our Heavenly Father wholly to masculine interpretation.
Congress appointed a committee to study the floods of petitions arriving daily from women. This is how it worked.
Women's petitions are generally referred to as a full committee of fools, carefully laid on the floor of the committee room to be a target at which to shoot tobacco juice. And the committee man who could hit the mark farthest is regarded as having done the most to kill the petition.
Even the President of the United States remained indifferent to the poignant arguments of the suffragists. Elizabeth Cady Stanton said of President Rutherford Hayes,
In President Hayes' last message, he reviews the interests of the Republic, from the Army and the Navy to the crowded condition of the mummies, dead ducks, and fishes in the Smithsonian Institution. Yet he forgets to mention 20 million women citizens robbed of their social, civil, and political rights. Resolved, that a committee be appointed to wait upon the President and remind him of the existence of one half of the American people whom he has accidentally overlooked.
the pioneer women who were then settling the West had no intention of being overlooked. Women in the territory of Wyoming won the vote in 1869, followed shortly by women in the neighboring territories of Utah, Colorado, and Idaho. When Wyoming applied for statehood in 1890, a furious bloc of senators opposed its admission because it allowed women to vote. The senator from Tennessee called it a reform against nature and predicted it would unsex and degrade the women of America. But Wyoming citizens refused to give in. Their legislature cabled back to Washington.
We will remain out of the Union 100 years rather than come in without our women.
Encouraging words, but as the years of struggle rolled by, the women of Seneca Falls realized they would not live to vote. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote,
We are sowing winter wheat, which other hands than ours will reap and enjoy.
24 hours before she died in 1902, Stanton dictated this plea to Theodore Roosevelt.
Mr. President, Abraham Lincoln immortalized himself by the emancipation of 4 million slaves. Immortalize yourself by bringing about the complete emancipation of 36 million women.
By 1900, over 3 million women worked for wages outside the home, often in hazardous and exploitive conditions, often with their children beside them at the machinery. They needed the ballot to give them a voice in making labor laws. In the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, 146 workers were killed trying to escape an unsafe building into which they had been locked to keep them at work. Suffragist Mary Ware Dennett wrote,
It is enough to silence forever the addle-headed, selfish drivel of anti-suffragists who claim that women should find their welfare under their natural protectors. Trust men who allowed 700 women to be wedged between machines in a 10-story building with no outside fire escapes and doors, exits locked and shuttered. We claim in no uncertain voice that the time has come when women should have the one efficient tool with which to make for themselves decent and safe working conditions, the ballot.
Working women flocked to the suffragist banner. With this new army of supporters, women succeeded in putting suffrage on the state's agendas.
In 1912, the suffrage referendum was passed in Arizona, Kansas, and Oregon.
Yay!
Defeated in Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin.
In 1914, the suffrage referendum, in 1913, 5,000 women marched down Pennsylvania Avenue on the day before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration, asking for the vote. They were mobbed by a hostile crowd.
In 1914, the suffrage referendum passed in Montana and Nevada.
Defeated in North and South Dakota, Nebraska, and Missouri.
In 1915, the suffrage referendum failed in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts, the saloons handed out pink tickets printed with "Good for 2 drinks if women suffrage is defeated."
When the United States entered World War I in 1917, women were urged once again to put aside their cause for the war effort. Elizabeth Cady Stanton's daughter reminded them,
The suffragists of Civil War days gave up their suffrage campaign to work for this country, expecting to be enfranchised in return for all their good services. They were told they must wait. Now it's 1917, and women are still waiting.
but the suffragists of 1917 had read history. They worked for the war, and they continued to work for the vote. While women in unprecedented numbers entered war service, standing in for soldiers in factories and on farms, they also held mass meetings, handed out countless leaflets, sponsored parades, plays, lectures, and teas, anything to get the arguments for women's suffrage before the public.
One suffragist said, "Some days I got up at 5:30 and I didn't get home until midnight, going from office to office, talking out the question."
In New York, 1,030,000 women signed a petition asking for the right to vote. The petitions were pasted on placards borne by women marchers in a suffrage parade. The possession of the petitions alone covered more than half a mile.
Other suffragists turned to the militant tactics of the Women's Party. They picketed outside the White House, keeping their vigil in rain and cold. This was a new tactic in 1917. The police finally arrested them for obstructing traffic. One eyewitness described the arrests.
An intense silence fell. The watchers saw not only younger women, but white-haired grandmothers hoisted into the crowded patrol wagon, their heads erect and their frail hands holding tightly to the banner until it was wrested from them by brute force.
Other suffrage organizations lobbied, appealed to every state, and canvassed every legislature while the White House pickets kept public attention focused on the issue. Finally, in 1917, at the height of the First World War, President Wilson spoke to urge the Congress to act on suffrage.
This is a people's war. They think that democracy means that women shall play their part alongside men and upon equal footing with them. If we reject means like this, in ignorant defiance of what a new age has brought forth, they will cease to follow us or trust us.
In January of 1918, the 19th Amendment to give women the right to vote came before the House.
Down the roll call, name by name, droned the voice of the clerk. Mann of Illinois, Barnhart of Indiana came from their hospital beds to vote for suffrage. Sims of Tennessee came in agony from a broken shoulder. Hicks of New York came from his wife's deathbed to fulfill his promise to her that he would vote for suffrage. Yes, no, the vote was close, but it was enough.
When the vote was over, the corridors filled with smiling, happy women. On the way to the elevators, a woman began to sing "Praise God from whom all blessings flow," but with the words of the suffragists. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all women here below.
Despite this monumental triumph, the suffragists still had much work to do. It would be another year before the Senate passed the suffrage amendment, and another year beyond that before the necessary 36 states would ratify it. Finally, on August 26, 1920, 101 years ago this summer, the 19th Amendment gave women throughout the nation the right to vote. At the last suffrage convention of 1920, Carrie Chapman Catt spoke to the joyful women.
Ours has been a movement with a soul ever leading on. Women came, served, and passed on, but others came to take their places. Who shall say that the millions of women who have toiled and hoped and met delay are not with us today, here, joining in our rejoicing? Their cause has won. Be glad today. Let your joy be unconfined, and let it speak so clearly that it will be heard around the world by women everywhere. Let it find its way to the soul of every woman who is longing for the opportunity and the liberty still denied her. Let your voices ring out the goodness and gladness in your hearts. Let us sing together. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's pride, let every mountainside, let freedom ring. Thank you.
I missed my one of my cues. Oh, well, we did all right. We did good.
I couldn't keep my I should have. You must have broad shoulders.
No, mine's been slipping.
Let's hear it one more time for the AAUW Vienna branch.
What was that? Whatever that Super Bowl thing was.
Thank you very much, all of you ladies from the AAUW. We really appreciated that wonderful reading. It's inspiring what our foremothers did for us and for our benefits.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to hand these down.